Season of fruitlessness, question mark. Do you ever feel like things just aren't clicking? You ever felt that way? Like it's just not clicking. Things aren't going like they're supposed to go. Like you're walking in the darkness. You ever felt like you're walking in the darkness? In the dark? Look, I used to work shift work, and I'd come home early in the morning before the sun was up and it was still dark. And because I wasn't home and the kids went to bed early and my wife can't sit still and relax, she has to find something to do in her boredom. So she would rearrange the furniture. And I would come in the dark, and I thought I knew where everything was. Then I would end up sprawled across a coffee table or something because things weren't as they were when I left. And sometimes life can feel that way. Like we're walking in darkness and we're running into things that we didn't even know were there. You ever run into something that you didn't even know was there? Maybe something in your own life. Look, when we started that fast last week, there was things coming up in my life that I knew they were there, but I had really suppressed them so deep that I didn't even remember them. And the Lord started revealing some things, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about? You ever get tripped up over something that you didn't know it was there? Or maybe you knew it was there, but you forgot where it was? Or lost track of where it was? I'm not talking about animate objects. I'm talking about events of the past. I'm talking about things that just happen in life. Like God's a million miles from you. And nothing that you're doing really matters anyway. Do you ever feel like nothing that you're doing really matters anyway? You ever felt that way? You got all the branches and the leaves, but you feel like you're not really bearing any fruit. Has that ever been you? Look, it's been me. It's been me recently. You ever just feel like you and God just ain't walking on the same road? And I'm not talking about backsliding. I'm not talking about anything like that. It's just like, God, where'd you go? What happened? Where are you? And all these things that I do, Lord, do they matter? Is it helping? Is it producing fruit? Or is it just things that I do? Mark 11:12 through 14. Now the next day, when they had come out from Bethany, he was hungry. That's and Jesus, seeing from afar a fig tree having leaves, he went to see if perhaps he would find some figs on it. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. In response, Jesus said to it, "Let no one eat fruit from you ever again." And his disciples heard it. For it was not the season for figs. That got me. I could understand if it was fig season and Jesus went to the tree and it didn't have any fruit. I could understand his disapproval of it. But he expected to find figs when it wasn't fig time. He expected to find fruit on that tree when it wasn't the season for that tree to produce fruit. What's that all about? Why would Jesus even expect figs when they were out of season? 2 Timothy 4:1 through 5. Really, I only wanted one little caption out of this, but when I started reading, I said, I like the whole thing. I charge you, therefore, before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearance in his kingdom. Preach the word. Here's what I really was looking for. Be ready in season and out. Be ready in season and out. And then the rest of it, I just got wrapped up in it because it sounds so much like the world we live in today. Convince, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and teaching. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers, and they will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to fables. But you be watchful in all things, endure affliction, and do the work of an evangelist. Fulfill your ministry. Who's he talking to? Everybody say, he's talking to me. He's talking to you. He's talking to me. He's talking to us. He expects us to fulfill what? Our ministry. What's your ministry? Go out in the world, preach the gospel to every creature. That's the work of an evangelist, right? That's being fruitful. That's producing fruit. So in light of this, he said, be ready in season and out. So it wasn't really about the tree, was it? Was Jesus' conversation with the fig tree really about the tree? No, that tree was just doing what it was supposed to do and not have fruit at that time. What he was really talking about was us. He said, look, I understand it wasn't the time for the figs to be produced, but in your life, you produce fruit in season and you produce fruit out of season. You produce fruit when fruit just happens. Look, in season, fruit just happens. Right? I've got that satsuma tree in my yard, and in season, those satsumas, they're just going to happen. And in our life, there's going to be times when fruit just happens, and you can't even stop it. But there's going to be other times when you got to make it happen. There's going to be other times when you got to really put forth some effort and defy some things in the natural. See, for that satsuma tree to produce out of season, or that fig tree to produce out of season, it would have to defy the natural. There's going to have to be times in our lives when we have to defy the natural to produce fruit in spite of the season that we're in. In spite of what you feel, in spite of what you think, in spite of everything it seems like, we're still going to have to produce fruit. It wasn't really about the tree. It was really about us. We all go through seasons where we feel as though we are fruitless. But I'm going to ask you this. Are you really? Are you really? And if you are, what are you going to do about it? If you really are fruitless, if you're really not bearing any fruit right now, what are you going to do about it? Look, I know we've got excuses. I know life happens. I know we go through struggles. I know we go through hardships. I know. But in spite of what we're going through, the expectation for our life is still produce fruit. It's still produce fruit. Because the reality is that thing that you're going through, that situation that you're in, it may not be as though it appears. It may be a facade. But right in the middle of it, you think you're walking through the depths of hell. But the reality is, He's right there with you. And He promised He'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. And then on the backside, you look back and you say, that wasn't bad after all. That was actually a blessing. That thing that I thought was the worst it could be, look how much better my life is today because I walked through that place. You know what I'm talking about? Have you had any of those events in your life? Man, I have. Where I thought, God has forsaken me. Then I get on the backside and look back and think, my God, He was working miracles on my behalf and I didn't even see it. When we are in a seemingly fruitless season of life, life seems to have a way of placing us next to someone that seems to have it all together. Bless their heart. Bless their heart. Mr. Bluebird is on their shoulder, and he's singing, and they're skipping, and singing in the rain, and tiptoeing through the tulips, and they disrupted our pity party. You ever been there? And you just want to go over there and trip them. Because it's all going well for them. But what about me, God? And why'd you put me right here where I got to watch their life be a success right in front of me? And then the bluebird lands on your shoulder and poops on your new suit. You ever been there? I stole that one. I'll let you guess from who. Who does that sound like? That sounds just like Pastor Mike Mealy. But it's true. Sometimes we think all of a sudden when the bluebird flies off their shoulder, lands on us, man, it's all fixing to break through for me. Then you realize he was just taking a potty break. Then he goes back to the other guy. We can't take the bait and begin comparing our lives to the lives of others. You can never, everybody say never. Never compare your life to the lives of others. I heard a guy this past week, he was talking about comparing his kids. And he said, how can they be so different? He said, I got one that I'm putting through college and one I'm about to put through a wall. But we can't compare because they're completely different. Your life is completely different to that person you were looking at. Your calling is completely different to that person. The group of people that you have influence in is totally different from theirs. Everything about you is different from them. Don't ever compare. Don't ever compare. Comparison will kill your potential. Comparison will isolate you. That's why comparison is so deadly. It will isolate you, and it'll make you feel like you're the only one. When you look to somebody else's lives, when you look into the lives of other people, and you start thinking, why can't I have what they have? Why can't I do what they can do? Why can't I be what they are? All of a sudden, you start to feel very, very alone. Now, you're devil bait. Because your adversary, the devil, goes out as a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. How does a lion hunt? What's the first thing he's going to do? He's going to try to isolate. It might be a herd of wildebeest or whatever the herd is. I watched another day killing elephants. A big old elephant. Now, what could that elephant really do to them lions? And it's over. But when they got the elephant isolated, he panicked. Where's all my buddies? Where'd everybody go? And in the distraction, they killed him. So when you allow yourself to become isolated, which is exactly what will happen when you start comparing your life to someone else's, you are a prime candidate for the devil. You just stepped out there and invited him to come in and ravish your life. From the outside, the lives of others often seems great, but you don't know the whole story. You don't know the whole story. They have bad hair days too. From your view, everything's great. But the truth is, we all have areas of our life that it seems like we failed. We all have areas of our life where we seem like we failed. And then what we'll do is we'll take that area where I seem to be a failure and we'll compare it to someone else who's in that area, their life's a great success. But the truth is, in my life, there's another area where I've been a great success and they've been a failure. But we don't ever see it that way. The truth is, we all go through seasons where it just ain't clicking. And we all go through times when we feel like everything that we're doing is for naught. But it's not the case. It's not the truth. Survey your life honestly and see, are you really fruitless? Are you really fruitless? Do a survey, not right now, but do a survey of your life and examine your life closely and find out, are you really fruitless? Often you'll find that there's more fruit than you realized. And if you do find little or no fruit, change some things. Don't keep doing what you're doing, because what you're going to have, the same result. If you want to do something, if you want to have something you never had, you've got to do something you've never done. You've got to step out. You've got to break away from the comfort zone and step out and dare to take a risk. Anybody ever been successful not taking any risk? Nat and I have to do this often, or we'll begin to feel defeated. We have to do this regularly. We have to sit back and share with each other the things that are working, to get our mind off the things that aren't. Because what will happen is our focus will go to the things that aren't working. And we'll become defeated. And we'll get depressed and all kind of stuff. But we have to constantly take each other and remind each other of the stuff that is working. The stuff that is going well. The things that are clicking. And then we can get motivated again. And we say, you know what? It's not all for naught. There's some fruit being produced. Thank God. We have to look at the victories. We have to look at the lives that have been changed. We have to remind each other of the dreams that God has manifested in our life. Just the other day, we were sitting in the living room and I just started laughing. And I looked at her and I said, look around. Because I can remember a day when having a home was our dream. I can remember a day when having kids was our dream. And I look around and there's our kids and their friends and we're in our home and everybody's laughing. And I just started laughing and I looked at her and I said, look at all of our dreams. Look what God did. And it's just so amazing to me. But we have to continue to remind ourselves. Because if not, we'll look on the dreams that didn't come to pass. And we'll forget about all the stuff that did. We have friends who have very large churches with a lot of people and do a lot of big things. But we can't compare ourselves to them. We can't. You know what? The truth is, I love it right here. I love being your pastor. I love it. Because I think we got the best group of people in the world. I'm being honest with you. I thank God for you. I thank God for connecting our lives, every single one of you. Because every life matters. So what's it matter if we have 2 or 2,000? If everyone matters. Jesus went across a sea in a storm to reach one, and he was demon-possessed. Philip left a revival to go in the desert to meet one, and he couldn't even reproduce. See what I'm saying? God's focus isn't always on the big stuff. Because in the life of that one, that's a big thing. Right? All we're measured by, all you're measured by, is our callings. That's what we're measured by in God's eyes. What God's going to measure me by is not what other churches did. It's what He called me to do. He's going to say, now here's what you did. Here's what I called you to do. That's for every one of us. Because you're here for a purpose. God created you because God said, this is what I need done. So let me make someone in my image, and I'm going to equip them with everything that they need to fulfill that purpose. And now let me send them out into the earth to do that job that I need them to do. That's what we're going to be judged by. Not what anybody else has, does, any of that stuff. Only what you were created to do. When I feel like nothing's clicking for me, or when God seems distant, I find that my focus has become small. And I'm focusing on the failures and the small defeats rather than on the big picture. Let me show you. John 11, 14 and 15. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad. What? Is that what he said? Yeah. And I am glad for your sake that I wasn't there. But Jesus, that's your friend Lazarus, and now you're telling me he's dead and you're glad you wasn't there? Yes. Yeah. That you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. So I want you to take yourself and put yourself in the place of Lazarus and his family. Does it seem like it was a failure? Does it? Lazarus in the grave, day 2. Does it seem like a failure? Yeah. Does it seem like God didn't hold up to his end of the deal? Yes. Does it seem like things aren't going to get better than this? Yes. Does it seem like it all came to an end? Yes. Day 3, how is it? It's the same. It's stinking. Yes. Stinking. That's what they told him when Jesus came to the tomb. By now, he stinketh. But how about day 4? But how about day 4? Now, does it seem like a failure? Now, when Jesus says roll back the stone, does it seem like a failure? When he says Lazarus come forth and a dead man comes out of the tomb, now does it seem like a failure? Not anymore, right? That's what I'm saying. When you're going through hell, you can't think this is the end. When you're going through a bad situation, don't think it ends there. Look to your future. Look to the next day. How's it going to be the next day? Well, you know, you might wake up and it's still stinking. But there's going to come a day when Jesus speaks into your tomb and you come out. Now what's the story? Now what's the story? How do you think Lazarus came out of that tomb? Well, he come out like this because he was all wrapped up. He was like a mummy. And then he told them around him, you unwrap him. And that's a whole other sermon for another day. But how do you think, after they unwrapped him, how do you think he walked out of there? Who you think he was? You think he was dancing? As I said, we look at the areas of our life that are bearing fruit to motivate ourselves. But we also have to look at the areas that aren't bearing any fruit, and we have to prune them away. Like I said, we survey our life, and we hold each other accountable. And this area of our life is bearing fruit. So what should we do? We should magnify that. We should fertilize that. We should focus our energy and our efforts there. But we have this other area, it's not bearing any fruit. So what do we have to do? We have to lop it off, right? If you want to produce more fruit, isn't that how you do that when in a fruit tree? Branches that aren't producing fruit, but they're still in nutrients from the rest of it, the rest of the tree, don't you cut them away? That's what we have to do in our life. Here's the tough thing. What about when it's something that you really love? God spoke to me that day clearly about getting rid of all my horses. Well, not really all of them, but really the ones that I was passionate about. And he asked me that same thing. How's that working for you? Well, I love it. I really enjoy that. But it takes a lot of your time. Yes, it does. A lot of your energy, a lot of your finances. Yes, it does. Well, what's it producing in your life? Not a lot, Lord. Well, it's time to cut it off. That's just an example, but there's been a whole bunch of those things. I had to do that with fishing, and I had to do that with bow hunting, and I had to do it. And then, Lord, lets me get back into it a little at a time, but sometimes I tend to go overboard with things. I'm probably the only one in here like that, huh? To have your borders enlarged, or to walk in a greater degree of fruitfulness, you cannot seek to save the familiar. Did you get that? You cannot seek to save the familiar. We can't hold on to the unfruitful even when it's something that we really like. You can't choose the comfort over the leading of the Holy Spirit. Did you hear me? We cannot choose our comfort over the leading of the Holy Spirit. If the Holy Spirit leads me out of where I'm comfortable, the wise man will follow. Did you get that? I know it's not easy. And the older we get, the harder it seems to be. But you're still here on earth. Therefore, God's not through with you. Therefore, you must still follow, right? Isn't that what this whole salvation thing is about? We call ourselves followers of Jesus. Well, He's not standing still. So if our life, like Cole said, our life ain't moving, we might be mistaken for dead. You ever had buzzards circle you? I have. Thought, maybe I better move. You can choose the comfort or the leading of the Holy Spirit, but very seldom will you have both. You must embrace fear and incompatibility without complaining. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I'm preaching to me. I'm preaching to me. I said fear and incompatibility. What's that mean? That means working together with people that you don't necessarily like, who you have nothing in common with, and frankly, you don't really want to be around. 2 Kings chapter 3. We're not going to read it. I'm just going to paraphrase it. King Jehoshaphat and King Joram joined forces to defeat the king of Moab, even though those two kings could not stand each other. Did you hear what I said? King Jehoshaphat and King Joram, they didn't like each other. They didn't get along at all. In fact, it would have been really easy for them to go to war against each other. But when Moab raised up and said, I'm coming to attack, they joined together and they said, together we're going to defeat him. And that's what they did, even though they didn't like each other. You have an enemy out there who has sworn war against you. And sometimes you have to join forces with people that you don't like to get the job done. I don't like preaching that because God's going to make me walk in it. And I get uncomfortable around people I don't like because I have the gift of sarcasm. I don't know where I got it. It didn't come down my lineage, I don't think. Because there's nobody here in my family that's been blessed with that gift, I'm sure. But man, I can be real good at it. And sometimes if I'm not careful and I have to be right next to somebody I don't like, sometimes it'll slip. Here's the deal. Look, I can be that way with people that I love. All right? Yeah. With people I love. Then when God puts me with people that I don't love, I do the same thing, but I mean it. And they don't know the difference. Sorry. But sometimes to be fruitful, we have to allow ourselves to be joined to and work with people that we don't like, we don't understand, and we have nothing in common with. And that makes me uncomfortable. But if we're going to be fruitful, that's what God does. I have a word here. I've preached this some time back, but it just came up in the middle of this. It's a whole nother sermon, but I'm just going to have a little snippet because I want somebody to grab it. It's about tipping point. Some of you might remember that sermon. Cole brought from Paul's house a big tractor tire in here, and we laid it right here. And tipping point. Everything and every situation reaches a tipping point. It's the point where the weight of what you've been struggling against now rapidly works for you, creating momentum toward your success. Did you get that? So we had that big tractor tire in here, and the picture was, I picked it up, and it was a strain to get it up, then to get it here. And the further we got this way, the harder it was, right? But it reached a point where it tipped. And now you can't even stop it because it reached a tipping point. Now, I said that to say this. That thing that you've been struggling with, that thing that you've been working hard against, that thing that you've been leaning into, there comes a point when it reaches its tipping point. And now suddenly, it works rapidly, creating momentum toward your success. And you can't stop it. Look, if that's for you, I want you to say something out loud. Take that and claim it and grab a hold of it. You understand what I'm telling you? Don't let that pass you by. Because you might be pushing on something forever if you don't grab a hold of the promise of God and say, this is fixing to start working. And it's all this time it's been working against me, but it's fixing to start working for me. And it's going to be an unstoppable momentum. Where could you be and what could you have if you hadn't given in to fear? Where could you be and what could you have if you hadn't given in to fear? Man, I remember right before Hurricane Rita, I was at work, and I can say this on video because I don't work there no more. I was reading the paper, and I saw somebody was selling some rent houses. It was 3 duplexes, and I felt the Lord speak to me and say, buy it. And I said, what am I going to do with rent houses? What am I going to do with these duplexes? I got a good job. I don't need that headache. Within a few weeks of that, Hurricane Rita hit. Then I'm thinking, man, I wish I had them duplexes. That sure would be nice. Because housing is in high demand. Right? And I looked in the rearview mirror and watched my opportunity go. Because the truth is, I let fear pull me right out of a blessing that God was trying his best to throw me in front of. Now, how would my life be different? I don't know. I don't know. What would have happened there? I don't know. I don't know. I never will. That's what's sad. But where would you be? And what could you have if you would have never given in to fear? That's just one instance. I'd hate to even venture into all of them. If you're not having to battle fear, you're not going the right direction. You're not walking toward fruitfulness. If you're not having to battle fear, you're not walking toward fruitfulness. Did you get that? Because fruitfulness is going to take you stepping out of your comfort zone into a place where you're going to have to apprehend fear. You'll have to get used to smelling devil breath if you're going to be fruitful. You're going to have to get used to the devil being right here, screaming at you. And you're going to have to be determined that you're going to walk forward anyway, in spite of fear. You ever had the devil right there? If not, you better start walking. You better start making some changes. Because when you start walking toward the promise of God, when you start walking in the calling of God, he's going to get right there. Right where you can smell his breath. And he's going to point out everything that you're not, and everything that you should have done, and every time you screwed up, and you're going to have to walk forward anyway. Somebody told me about that. I can remember one night when he actually poked me in the chest. Hard enough that I had to look to see who was there. I'm not giving him any time. Why would God tell us over 380 times in the Word, in the Bible, I said that for a reason. Why would God say over 380 times in our Bible for us not to be afraid? Fear not, if it wasn't expected to happen. You think God expected the devil to get right there? Yeah, he knew he was. He did it to Jesus. I just had some mints. You gave them to me. If you are the Son of God. Right? Look, if he'll do that with Jesus, and what did Jesus say? Get behind me, because your breath's stinking in the front. Get behind me, devil. Don't you know it's written? Man should not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God. If you are who you say you are. You think the devil didn't know who he was? Yeah. Look, when Jesus walked through town, the demons would cry out, Son of God, why do you torment me? They didn't need an introduction. They had met. They used to worship him in the throne room. They knew who he was. That same devil that said, if you are, used to play music for him. He knew who he was. He was testing to see if Jesus knew who he was. Same way he's going to test you to see if you know who you are. So what do you say? What do you say when he questions you? You better have a response. Because if not, now he's going to plant a seed of doubt that's going to grow if you don't uproot it quickly. That's why the Word says, take every thought captive. Because about half of them he's going to put there. Over 380 times he tells us in the Bible to fear not. All fear, here's good news. All fear is a spirit, and none of it's from God. The Word says, God has not given us a spirit of fear. Spirit of fear. So where does fear? A spirit. And does it come from God? God has not given. So therefore, where's it from? Hell. Do you have authority? That's good news about fear. It's not from God. It's an illegitimate emotion, and you have authority over it. Huh? That's good news. That ought to make you shout. If you weren't afraid to. Oh, I'm sorry. See that gift of sarcasm? Oh. I didn't. It just came to me. Embrace the fear as confirmation that you heard a word that makes no sense to your flesh. Embrace that fear as a confirmation. So when the fear comes, you say, whoo, now I know it's from God. So now, instead of having that thing stop you, it compels you forward. You got that? It's okay to be afraid. You don't have to be ashamed of it, as long as you domesticate it and make it work for you. Got that? Got that? Make that fear work for you. Okay, fear, you came at me to stop me. But now, because you came, now I know. Now I'm pushing on for sure. Because you wouldn't have come and tried to stop me if God hadn't spoken to me. And if you weren't afraid of me. So now you domesticate it. Don't allow fear to drive you back to Egypt, shackled by logic and reason. Don't allow fear to drive you back to Egypt, shackled by logic and reason. Logic and reason. Now you're demobilized. And now all you can have is what comes natural. Because logic and reason take you right out of the realm of supernatural. Because there ain't nothing logical or reasonable that happens in the supernatural. This week, I need you to make sure I listen to this about 10 times. You have to commit yourself to emotional discomfort to be fruitful. Hey, there's good news. That sounded so much like Jesus. Jesus tells the disciples, look, they're going to arrest you. They're going to kill you, crucify you and your family. They're going to they're going to talk about you. They're going to lie about you. And all that. And he said, and then it's going to get bad. It's like, what? What you mean? And then it's going to get bad. You just told me they're going to crucify me. Yeah, but then it's going to get bad. Good news. No one finds a path to fruitfulness or success within their comfort zone. Don't look at me with a blank look. Get it. No one finds the path to fruitfulness or success within their comfort zone. You're going to have to step out. You're going to have to take a risk. You will not become a success spiritually or in the natural without stepping out of where you're comfortable. Look, I know that's not easy. That's hard to do. Honestly, folks, I don't even like talking on the phone to people. Natalie will tell you that. It'll torment me for days before I know I got to call somebody. About what? Nothing. Now, I'm not talking about my friends and family, but people that I don't know. That'll get to me because I'm uncomfortable there. Because if I allow the devil to, he will tell me that I don't know how to socialize. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Because that's an area of my life that I feel I'm a failure. You don't even need to correct me. I'm just telling you how I feel. It makes me not want to step out and meet new people. It makes me not want to step out and talk to people that I don't know. Does that make sense to you? Because I'm not the only one in here like that. But here's the thing. if I allow that fear to stop me from doing those things in spite of how I feel, I cannot grow. And this church cannot grow. Natalie can tell you, I don't even like calling my customers who I know very well to set up an appointment to trim their horses' hooves. A lot of you, that probably seems foreign to you because you see me up here and I seem like I'm comfortable here, and because I am, because this is my calling. You understand? But when I step out of my calling into the natural, I struggle greatly in communicating with people, in talking to people. I'm saying that to help somebody because I'm not the only one in here that struggles with that. Don't let fear paralyze you. Make sure it motivates you. Make sure it motivates you. Don't let it paralyze you. It'll rob you of everything God intended for you if you let it paralyze you. Make sure it motivates you. Make sure it drives you forward and doesn't make you take a step back. Because when you take a step back because of fear, it won. Are you reaching new people groups? Or have you settled for being with your own kind? Are you reaching people who aren't like you? Look, I know that's not easy. That's not easy. It's not easy for me. I just told you the things I struggle with. So it's not, look, it's a whole lot easier for me to talk to somebody who I have common ground with, and that's not even easy. But it's a whole lot easier than somebody I can't find anything in common with. Do you understand? But if I narrow who I talk to down to people who are like me, guess how small my area of influence is? Because you know how many people are like me? None. None. Ask her. I'm weird. Lori? I expected an amen from you on that. I expected at least Lori to amen that. If I narrow it down to people who are like me, now, I will say this. I will say that God has blessed me with the ability to find common ground with a lot of people. And I can find something that I can somewhat relate to, thank God, because I wouldn't hardly be able to function if it wasn't for that. But if I narrow it down to people who have the same interest as me, my realm of influence has shrunk to hardly anything, right? I remember a pastor several years ago said, why don't you start a cowboy church? And in the natural, what's that say to me? That'd be perfect. But how many people can I reach? You see what I'm saying? Now my demographic has shrunk to what? And I'm not against cowboy churches. I think it's great. I think that they ought to be all over the place. And I'll support them. But that's not what God called me to. Because the truth is, how many of y'all would be here? But are you reaching people, new people groups, people that you have nothing in common with, or have you settled for just being around people like you? What if you don't like them? Well, God didn't ask you if you liked them. Well, what if you don't get along with them? Well, God told you just need to get along with them. I'm trying to help us. I'm trying to help us. Because we have to reach people who aren't like us. Each of us have to do that. Look, this isn't just for the pastor. Because really, the people out there that are to be reached, who are they supposed to be reached by? They're supposed to be reached by you. That's what we're supposed to be here together to do. I'm supposed to equip you to go out there and reach them. But now when I'm out there, I have to reach them too. But the primary weight of that is on you. There's no growth in staying only around people who are like you. Truthfully, I don't want to be around nobody like me. I'd fight with him. I live with one that's like me, and we got to work at it. Huh? Ain't that right? So if I only surround myself with people like me, I'm going to do a lot of fighting. because they're going to aggravate me, because that's what we do. I'm the guy that'll make the noise that's annoying, and I'll just make it until somebody tells me to stop. And then I'll do it 2 more times. That was yesterday. Our mandate is to preach the gospel to everyone. Not just those who are like us. Right? So who needs the gospel? Everyone. Our mandate is preach the gospel to every creature. Right? Go into the world, preach the gospel to every creature. Isn't that our commission? That's what we're called to do. That's what we're created for. God gives us unique abilities and different techniques of doing it, but the mandate's the same. Go into the world, preach the gospel to every creature. Give everyone the opportunity to be born again, even the ones that aren't like you. Now, I told Natalie last night, I said, I've got about 5 or 6 different sermons, and they're all into the same thing, because somehow we got from a season of unfruitfulness to where we are now, and we went different ways. But I said, God gave me this, so therefore all these different little side notes are for somebody, probably me, and this group that lives in here. It's a strange group up here. And they all needed a different word today. But I hope you did too. I trust that you did. I trust that you did.